In the sweltering summer of 1858, house slave Noelle catches the eye of wealthy New York businessman Bram Whitmore during a dinner at Georgia's Chiswick estate. When she walks through the main hall with dignity despite her status, Bram is captivated by her spirit and makes a shocking request that will change both their lives forever. Join us for this tale of courage, societal boundaries, and a love that dares to defy convention in pre-Civil War America. Before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The summer of 1858 brought a heat unlike any other to the Chiswick estate. Even the expensive lace curtains in the parlor seemed to droop under the weight of the Georgia humidity. Inside those grand walls, there were two worlds that never mixed, the world of wealth and privilege above, and the world of service and survival below. Noelle wiped sweat from her brow as she worked in the kitchen. At 24, she had spent most of her life as a house slave at the Chiswick estate. She wasn't like the others. While they kept their eyes down and voices low, something inside Noelle refused to be dimmed. "You're going to get yourself in trouble again," Martha whispered, noticing how Noelle stood straight backed as she polished the silver. "Mr. Chiswick don't like when we look him in the eye." "I can't help it," Noelle replied, her voice low but firm. "My mama always told me that no matter what they take from us, we still got our dignity." Martha shook her head. "Dignity won't save you from the whip." The kitchen bustled with activity as preparations were underway for one of Mr. Chiswick's famous dinner parties. These monthly gatherings brought together the wealthiest men in 3 counties, judges, plantation owners, and businessmen who controlled everything from cotton prices to court verdicts. "I heard there's a special guest coming tonight," said Martha as she kneaded dough. "Some rich man from New York." "What's a northerner doing down here?" Noelle asked, her curiosity piqued. "They say he's looking for a wife, a proper southern lady with the right family name." Noelle almost laughed. "Of course he is. Another rich man looking to buy himself some southern charm." Mrs. Chiswick entered the kitchen suddenly, her silk dress rustling with each step. All conversation stopped. "Noelle," she said sharply, "once you're done here, I need fresh linens brought to the blue guest room. Mr. Whitmore will be staying with us for a week." "Yes, ma'am," Noelle responded, keeping her eyes just low enough to avoid being called disrespectful. Mrs. Chiswick lingered a moment too long. "And make sure you use the side entrance. Mr. Chiswick's guests don't need to be disturbed by the help walking through the main H-hall." After Mrs. Chiswick left, Martha nudged Noelle. "See? Special guest. His name is Bram Whitmore, 30 years old and richer than anyone in the county, they say." "And what do I care about another white man with money?" Noelle whispered, though she couldn't deny a flicker of curiosity. As evening approached, carriages began arriving at the estate. From the window of the linen closet, Noelle caught glimpses of finely dressed men and women making their way up the grand staircase to the main entrance. The last carriage was different, sleek and black with silver trim, pulled by 2 matching white horses. The man who stepped out stood taller than the others. Even from a distance, Noelle could see he carried himself differently, less swagger, more substance. "That must be him," she murmured to herself, "the New Yorker." With the fresh linens gathered in her arms, Noelle made her way toward the blue guest room. The proper path would have been through the narrow servants' corridor, but there had been a leak there earlier in the day, and the floor was still wet. Noelle hesitated at the junction between the main hall and the side passage. She could hear the dinner party in full swing in the parlor. If she was quick, she could cut through the edge of the main hall and be upstairs before anyone noticed. She took a deep breath and made her decision. Bram Whitmore had spent the entire dinner trying not to show his boredom. The men around him discussed cotton prices and horse breeding as if they were the only topics worthy of conversation. The women smiled demurely and said nothing of substance. At 30, Bram had built his fortune in shipping and railroad investments. After losing his wife to pneumonia 3 years earlier, he had thrown himself into his work. It was his business partner who had finally convinced TM that it was time to consider remarrying. "Southern women make excellent wives," his partner had insisted, "raised to be proper ladies. None of that northern suffragette nonsense." So here he was, enduring endless talk about bloodlines and family names. The Chiswick estate was just the first stop on what was beginning to feel like a very long journey. Mr. Cheswick raised his glass. To new friendships and potential business ventures. Everyone drank, and Bram forced a smile. That's when he saw her. She hadn't meant to be seen. She was trying to slip quickly past the edge of the parlor, her arms full of linens, but something about her made him look twice. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she was, with high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. It was the way she moved, with purpose and dignity that seemed out of place for someone in her position. Their eyes met for just a moment. The room seemed to stop. Bram stood without thinking. "Who is she?" he asked, interrupting whatever Mr. Cheswick had been saying. The room went silent. All eyes turned to Noelle, who had frozen in place. Mrs. Cheswick laughed nervously. No one of concern. A house girl. She must have lost her way. But Bram stepped forward. "I don't think she's lost. I think she knows exactly where she's going." Noelle's heart pounded so hard she feared everyone could hear it. She lowered her eyes, ready to flee, but something held her there. His gaze wasn't cruel or leering like she'd seen from other visitors. It was different, like he was truly seeing her. "Noelle," Mrs. Cheswick's voice cut through the tension, "use the proper hallway and bring Mr. Whitmore some fresh water for his room." "Yes, ma'am," Noelle managed to say before hurrying away, feeling Bram's eyes following her every step. Later that night, after all the guests had retired to their rooms, Noelle was sent to deliver a pitcher of water to the blue guest room. She knocked softly on the door. "Come in," came the deep voice from inside. Bram Whitmore stood by the window, his jacket removed and sleeves rolled up. He turned when she entered, and Noelle kept her eyes on the floor as she placed the water on the bedside table. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome, sir," she replied, automatically earning to leave. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. Noelle hesitated. "Noelle, sir." "Noelle," he repeated, as if testing how it felt to say her name. "I'm Bram Whitmore." "I know who you are, sir," she said, still not meeting his eyes. "Look at me, please." It wasn't a command as much as a request. Slowly, Noelle raised her eyes to meet his. "You walked into that room earlier like you belonged there," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have used the main hall." "That's not what I meant." He took a step closer. "Everyone else in that room was pretending to be something they're not. You were the only real person there." Noelle didn't know how to respond. No white man had ever spoken to her this way. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore," she said finally, backing toward the door. "Good night, Noelle," he replied, making no move to stop her. As she closed the door behind her, Noelle leaned against the wall, her heart racing. There was something dangerous happening, and she knew she should stay far away from Bram Whitmore. But as she made her way back to the slaves' quarters, she couldn't help but replay their brief encounter in her mind. The next morning, Noelle was assigned to serve breakfast. When she entered the dining room with a tray of biscuits, she found Bram already there, deep in conversation with Mr. Cheswick. "My shipping business is looking to expand further south," Bram was saying. "Charleston has a fine harbor, but I've heard Savannah might offer better opportunities." "Wise thinking," Mr. Cheswick nodded. "I have connections in both ports who could be of assistance." Noelle kept her eyes down as she placed the biscuits on the table, but she could feel Bram watching her. "Thank you, Noelle," he said, causing Mr. Cheswick to look up in surprise. "You know the girl's name?" he asked with a frown. Bram sipped his coffee casually. "I make it a point to know the names of everyone who works in a house where I'm staying. Good business practice." Mr. Cheswick seemed unsettled but didn't argue. Throughout breakfast, Noelle felt Bram's eyes on her whenever she entered the room. Not in the way other men sometimes looked at her, with hunger or disdain, but with genuine curiosity. Later, as she cleared the dishes, she found a folded piece of paper tucked under a plate. Making sure no one was watching, she slipped it into her pocket. Only when she was alone in the pantry did she unfold it to read the message written in careful handwriting. "You walked in like you belonged. I'd give everything I own to see you do it again." Noelle quickly refolded the paper and hid it in her dress. Her hands trembled slightly. She knew she should throw it away. Nothing good could come from this attention. But she didn't. OVR the next few days, Bram extended his stay at the Cheswick estate. He cited interest in Mr. Cheswick's cotton operation and the possibility of a business partnership, but Noel noticed how his eyes followed her whenever she was in the room. He began asking about her, casual questions that seemed innocent enough but clearly were meant to learn more about her. "Does Noel handle all the serving duties?" he asked Mrs. Cheswick during tea. "She works prima Riley in the house," Mrs. Cheswick replied, looking confused by his interest. "She can read a little, which makes her useful for inventory." "She can read?" Bram asked, raising an eyebrow. Mrs. Cheswick lowered her voice. "My late mother taught her the basics when she was a child. A mistake, in my opinion, but it does make her helpful with keeping track of supplies." Noel, who was arranging flowers nearby, pretended not to hear this conversation, but her heart swelled with pride that he now knew she could read. It was her most closely guarded secret that she had taught herself far more than the basics by sneaking newspapers and books whenever possible. That evening, Noel found another note, this time tucked between the clean linens she was carrying. "Meet me in the garden after dinner, please." She knew she shouldn't go. If she was caught alone with a white man, especially a guest, the punishment would be severe. But something about Bram Whitmore made her willing to take the risk. The garden behind the Cheswick house was lush with summer blooms. Magnolia trees provided deep shadows where one could hide from view. After ensuring that the kitchen was clean and the family had retired to the parlor, Noel slipped outside. Bram was waiting by the stone bench near the rose bushes. He stood when he saw her approach. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I shouldn't be here," Noel replied, staying a safe distance away. "I know." He nodded. "And I shouldn't have asked you to come, but I needed to speak with you away from prying eyes." "Why?" she asked directly, her curiosity overcoming her caution. "Because from the moment you walked into that room, I haven't been able to think of anything else." He took a step closer. "Did you know you stopped the room when you walked in?" She shook her head. "I wasn't supposed to be there." "Then maybe it's time someone changed the rules," he said quietly. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging between them. "Tell me about yourself," Bram said finally. "The real you, not what they say about you." Noel hesitated. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Where you're from, what you dream about, what you think when no one's watching." No one had ever asked her such things before. Slowly, cautiously, Noel began to speak. She told him about her mother, who had died when she was 12, about how she had taught herself to read using discarded newspapers, about the songs she hummed in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. Bram listened intently, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in her answers. He told her about New York, about his shipping business, about losing his wife to illness. "Is it true, Joe came here looking for a wife?" Noel asked finally. Bram smiled. "That's what my business partner suggested. He thought a Southern alliance would be good for business." "And what do you think?" "I think life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." His eyes held hers. "I came looking for a suitable match. Instead, I found—" He trailed off, but the way he looked at her finished his sentence. A sound from the house made Noel jump. "I have to go," she said urgently. "Will you meet me again?" Bram asked. She knew she should say no. Every moment with him put her at risk. But instead she nodded quickly before slipping back toward the house. As she hurried inside, Noel's mind was spinning. This couldn't be happening. He was a wealthy white man from New York. She was a slave. There was no future in whatever this was. But for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to be seen as a woman, not property, to be valued for her mind, not her labor. It was a dangerous dream, but once awakened, it refused to die. The next day, Mr. Cheswick announced that a special dinner would be held the following evening. Several important businessmen from Savannah would be joining them, and Bram would be the guest of honor. This could be the beginning of a very profitable relationship, Mr. Cheswick told his wife, as Noel served their lunch. "Whitmore's shipping connections could double our export capacity." Noel kept her face carefully blank, but her mind was racing. The dinner meant another chance to see Bram, even if from across the room. That afternoon, as she was gathering vegetables from the garden, Bram appeared beside her. "I've been invited to a special dinner tomorrow," he said casually, as if they were just making conversation. "Yes, sir. I heard," Noel replied, aware that they might be observed. "I have a request to make of Mr. Cheswick," Bram continued. "It may surprise everyone." "What kind of request?" Noel asked, her heart beating faster. But Bram just smiled. "You'll see. Just be ready." Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, walking back toward the house where Mr. Cheswick waited on the porch. That night Noel couldn't sleep. Bram's words echoed in her mind. What was he planning? Whatever it was, she feared it would only lead to trouble, for both of them, but especially for her. The night of the special dinner arrived. The Cheswick home was filled with the most influential men in the region. Noel and the other house slaves worked frantically to ensure everything was perfect. When it was time for the guests to be seated, Noel took her place along the wall with the other servers. She spotted Bram at the center of the table, looking handsome in a tailored black suit. He didn't look her way, engrossed in conversation with the man beside him. Mr. Cheswick stood to make a toast. "Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you all to my home, and especially I'd like to acknowledge our guest of honor, Mr. Bram Whitmore of New York, who I hope will soon become a valuable business partner to us all." Glasses were raised, and Bram nodded in acknowledgement. When the toast was complete, he remained standing. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Cheswick," Bram said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Before we begin this excellent meal, I have a small request." The room quieted, all eyes on Bram. "I'd like Miss Noel to join us at the table," he said plainly. Silence fell like a stone. Noel felt her blood turn cold. Every eye in the room turned to her, then back to Bram in disbelief. A nervous laugh rippled through the guests. Mr. Cheswick's face red-deaned. "She's a slave," Mr. Cheswick muttered. "She doesn't belong at the table." Bram set down his glass, calm, clear. "Then I won't be sitting either." Gasps echoed around the room. Bram stepped away from his chair and walked toward the servants' area, where Noel stood frozen in shock. He stopped in front of her, his back to the stunned dinner guests, and offered her his hand. "Miss Noel," he said softly, "would you do me the honor?" Noel hesitated, her mind racing. This was madness. If she took his hand, there would be no going back. Her life at Cheswick Estate would be over, one way or another. She looked into Bram's eyes and saw something she'd never seen before. Respect, equal to equal. Slowly, she placed her fingers in his. A collective gasp filled the room as Bram led her past the parlor doors, not as a servant, but as someone chosen. The silence in the dining room was deafening. Noel's hand trembled in Bram's as every pair of eyes fixed on them. Mr. Cheswick's face had turned a dangerous shade of purple. "Mr. Whitmore," he sputtered, "I don't know how things are done in New York, but in Georgia, this is unacceptable." Bram's grip on Noel's hand tightened reassuringly. "Perhaps it's time for change, Mr. Cheswick." Mrs. Cheswick hurried to her husband's side, whispering urgently in his ear. The other guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some avoiding eye contact, while others stared openly. "This dinner is over," Mr. Cheswick announced, throwing his napkin onto the table. "Gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption." One by one, the GUests stood from the table. Some nodded awkwardly to Bram, while others glared. Noel kept her eyes down, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. When the room had emptied, Mr. Cheswick turned to Bram, barely containing his rage. "In respect of your position and our potential business dealings, I will overlook this incident. But she," he pointed at Noel, "will be disciplined for her part in this disgraceful display." "She's done nothing wrong, Bram said firmly. "She is my property, Mr. Whitmore, and I will handle her as I see fit." Bram straightened to his full height. "How much?" "Excuse me?" Mr. Cheswick blinked in confusion. "How much for her freedom? Name your price." Noel's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Cheswick laughed harshly. "She's not for sale." "Everything has a price," Bram countered. "I'm prepared to be generous." A calculating look crossed Mr. Cheswick's face. "Even if I were to consider it, she's worth far more than you might think. Educated house slaves don't come cheap." $5,000, Bram said without hesitation. The amount hung in the air. It was more than most slaves would sell for, even skilled ones. Mr. Cheswick's eyes narrowed. What's your interest in her, Mr. Whitmore? Surely there are easier ways to find companionship. My intentions are my own business, Bram replied coldly. Do we have a deal? Mr. Cheswick studied him for a long moment. I'll need time to consider. You have until tomorrow morning, Bram said. In the meantime, she is not to be punished or mistreated in any way. Mr. Cheswick's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Martha will show you to your room, Mr. Whitmore. I think it's best if you stay in the guest house tonight. As Mr. Cheswick stormed out, Noelle finally found her voice. Why did you do that? She whispered. Before Bram could answer, Martha appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. I need to speak with you, Bram said to Noelle. Tomorrow morning in the garden. Noelle nodded slightly before Martha led Bram away. Left alone in the dining room, she steadied herself against a chair, her mind racing. In one evening, everything had changed. For better or worse, she couldn't tell. That night, Noelle was confined to the slaves' quarters. Word of what had happened spread quickly, and the others kept their distance, as if her situation might be contagious. Only Martha dared to sit beside her on her small cot. What were you thinking? Martha whispered. Taking his hand like that in front of everyone? I don't know, Noelle admitted. It just happened. They're saying he offered to buy you $5,000. Martha's eyes were wide. Is it true? Noelle nodded. Lord have mercy. Martha crossed herself. What's he want with you? I don't know that either. Noelle stared at her hands. But he's different, Martha. The way he looks at me. Like I'm a person. Be careful, Martha warned. White men have looked at slave women like they're people before. Doesn't usually end well for the women. Bram's not like that, Noelle insisted, though doubt crept into her mind. Why would a wealthy man from New York take such an interest in her? What did he really want? Get some sleep, Martha said, patting her shoulder. Whatever happens tomorrow, you'll need your strength. But sleep wouldn't come. Noelle lay awake, replaying the evening's events in her mind. The touch of Bram's hand, the look in his eyes, the incredible sum he'd offered for her freedom. What would freedom even mean? Where would she go? What would she do? And most importantly, what would Bram expect in return? Morning came too, quickly. Noelle was allowed to do her regular chores, but Mrs. Cheswick watched her like a hawk, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. You've caused quite enough trouble, Mrs. Cheswick said sharply when Noelle accidentally dropped a spoon. My husband is in his study with Mr. Whitmore now, deciding your fate. I hope you're satisfied. Noelle kept her head down, focusing on her work. Inside, her emotions warred between hope and fear. What if M.R. Cheswick refused to sell her? What if he decided to sell her to someone else instead, someone far away, to punish her? What if Bram bought her freedom only to expect things in return? Just before noon, she was summoned to Mr. Cheswick's study. Her legs felt weak as she made her way there, knocking softly on the heavy oak door. Enter, came Mr. Cheswick's voice. She stepped inside to find Mr. Cheswick seated behind his massive desk. Bram stood by the window, turning to face her as she entered. A third man, whom she recognized as Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer, sat in a corner chair with papers spread before him. Close the door, Mr. Cheswick ordered. Noelle did as instructed, then stood with her hands clasped in front of her, eyes lowered. Look at me, girl, Mr. Cheswick said. She raised her eyes, fighting to keep her expression neutral. Mr. Whitmore and I have reached an agreement, Mr. Cheswick C.K. said, his tone making it clear he wasn't pleased. He has offered a sum of $5,000 for your manumission. Noelle's breath caught in her throat. Manumission. Freedom. Do you understand what this means? Mr. Cheswick continued. You will no longer be under my protection or care. You will be responsible for yourself, your lodging, your food. Yes, sir, Noelle managed to say, her voice barely audible. Mr. Harrison is preparing the papers and Mr. Cheswick gestured to the lawyer. Once they are signed and the money is transferred, you will be given your freedom papers. Until then, you are still my property, is that clear? Yes, sir, she repeated, still unable to believe what was happening. You may go now. Pack your belongings. You'll be leaving this afternoon. Noelle curtsied automatically and turned to leave, her mind spinning. As she reached for the door handle, Bram spoke. Mr. Cheswick, might I have a word with Noelle alone? Mr. Cheswick frowned but nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. Harrison and I will wait in the parlor. When the door closed behind them, Noelle finally looked directly at Bram. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice stronger now. Bram stepped closer. Because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were meant for more than this life. What do you expect from me in return? She asked bluntly. His eyes widened slightly, then softened with understanding. Nothing you don't wish to give freely, he said gently. Your freedom is yours, Noelle. No strings attached. She searched his face for deception, but found none. I don't understand. I'm offering you a choice, Bram explained. You can take your freedom papers and go wherever you wish. Or, he hesitated, you can come with me to New York as my guest. I have a large house with plenty of room. You could work as my housekeeper if you wish, with fair wages, or simply stay until you decide what you want to do with your life. As your guest? Noelle repeated skeptically. Yes. He met her gaze steadily. I give you my word as a gentleman that your virtue and reputation will be protected under my roof. Separate quarters, propriety in all things. Why would you do this for a woman you barely know? Bram smiled softly. Because in the few days I've known you, I've seen your intelligence, your dignity, your strength. The world needs more of that, not less. And because... He paused. I believe there could be something between us worth exploring, given time, but only if you wish it too. Noelle's mind raced. Freedom was one thing, but to go north with this man she barely knew. Yet the alternative was to stay in Georgia, a free black woman in a slave state, with no money, no connections, and plenty of enemies. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Bram nodded. The choice is entirely yours, but know that my offer stands, regardless of your decision. The door opened, and Mr. Cheswick and the lawyer returned. Noelle curtsied again and hurried from the room, her thoughts in turmoil. Back in the slaves' quarters, Noelle packed her few belongings into a small cloth bundle. There wasn't much. 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a shawl, a comb, and a small wooden figure her mother had carved for her long ago. Martha watched her from the doorway. So it's true then? He's buying your freedom? Noelle nodded, still dazed by the morning's events. What will you do? Where will you go? Martha asked, concern in her voice. He's offered to take me to New York, Noelle said quietly. Martha's eyes widened. As what? As his guest, he says, or his housekeeper if I prefer. And you believe that? Martha shook her head. Men don't spend $5,000 for housekeeping. He says there would be separate quarters. Propriety. Martha didn't look convinced. And if you don't go with him? Noelle sat heavily on her cot. Then I'm a free woman with no money and nowhere to go, in a state where people like us are property. Martha sat beside her and took her hand. You know what's likely to happen if you go with him. Yes, Noelle admitted. But I also know what's certain to happen if I stay here. At least in New York I have a chance at a real life. Just be careful, Martha said, squeezing her hand. Don't trust too easily. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Samuel, one of the houseboys. They're asking for you in the main house, Noelle. It's time. Noelle hugged Martha tightly. I'll write to you if I can, she promised. Martha wiped away a tear. Go on now, and may God keep you safe. Into Cheswick Parlor, the atmosphere was tense. Mr. Harrison had laid out several documents on the table. Mr. and Mrs. Cheswick sat stiffly on one sofa, while Bram stood near the fireplace. Come forward, girl, Mr. Cheswick ordered. Noelle approached the table, her bundle clutched in her hands. These are your manumission papers, Mr. Harrison explained, pointing to one document. Once signed by Mr. Cheswick and witnessed by myself, you will legally be a Far E woman. Noelle nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Mr. Harrison turned to Bram. Mr. Whitmore, if you'll sign here. Acknowledging transfer of funds. Bram stepped forward and signed with a flourish. Mr. Cheswick followed, his signature angry and sharp against the paper. "It is done," Mr. Harrison announced, applying his seal to the document. He handed a folded paper to Noelle. "Keep this with you at all times. It is proof of your free status." Noelle took the paper with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Mrs. Cheswick sniffed disapprovingly. "I hope you're satisfied with the disruption you've caused, Noelle. After all we've done for you." Before Noelle could respond, Bram stepped beside her. "My carriage is waiting. We should go before it gets too late." Mr. Cheswick stood abruptly. "I expect our business dealings are now concluded, Mr. Whitmore." "On the contrary," Bram replied coolly. "I still believe a partnership would be beneficial to both of us. My offer stands, should you wish to reconsider." Mr. Cheswick's surprise was evident. He had clearly expected this to be the end of any potential business relationship. "I will consider it," he said finally. "Good day, then." Bram offered his arm to Noelle. "Shall we?" After a moment's hesitation, Noelle placed her hand on his arm. Together, they walked out of the Cheswick home, not as master and slave, not as servant and guest, but as two people facing an uncertain future together. Bram's carriage was indeed waiting, a sleek black vehicle with plush red interior. The driver, an older black man named Henry, tipped his hat to them both as Bram helped Noelle inside. As the carriage pulled away from the Cheswick estate, Noelle looked back one last time at the place that had been her prison for most of her life. A mixture of emotions washed over her: relief, fear, hope, uncertainty. "Are you all right?" Bram asked gently. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "It doesn't seem real." "It will take time," he said. "Freedom is an adjustment." They rode in silence for a while, the countryside rolling past the windows. Finally, Noelle spoke again. "I've made my decision," she said quietly. Bram turned to her, his expression careful. "And?" "I'll go with you to New York." She met his gaze steadily. "Booty as your housekeeper with wages, and if at any time I wish to leave, I may do so without question." "Agreed," Bram said immediately. "I would add only one condition of my own," Noelle tensed. "Which is?" "That you allow me to provide you with education. Books, tutors if you wish. You have a quick mind, Noelle. It should be nurtured." Unexpected tears sprang to her eyes. No one had ever spoken of her mind that way before. "I would like that," she managed to say. Bram smiled, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. "Then we have an agreement." "Where are we going now?" Noelle asked, realizing she had no idea of their immediate plans. "To Savannah," Bram replied. "We'll stay there for a few days while I conclude some business. Then we'll take a ship to New York." A ship? Noelle had never been on a ship before. The thought was both terrifying and exciting. "One of mine, actually," Bram said with a small smile. "The Northern Star. She's a fine vessel, fast and comfortable." Noelle gazed out the window, watching as the familiar landscape gave way to places she'd never seen before. Every mile took her further from her old life and closer to whatever awaited her. "Tell me about New York," she said after a while. Bram's face lit up as he began to describe his home city, the bustling streets, the tall buildings, the diverse people from all over the world. He told her about his house on Fifth Avenue, with its library full of books and its garden that bloomed in spring. "You'll have your own room, of course," he assured her, "on the third floor with the other staff. My housekeeper, Mrs. Collins, is a kind woman. She'll help you settle in." "Are there many free black people in New York?" Noelle asked. "Yes, quite a few," Bram nodded. "There's even a neighborhood called Seneca Village, where many have built homes and bus innesses. It's not without its challenges," he added honestly, "but it's a far cry from the South." As the carriage rolled on toward Savannah, Noelle felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Whether it was foolish or not, she couldn't tell. But for now, it was enough to carry her forward into the unknown. They arrived in Savannah as the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city's elegant squares and buildings. Bram directed the carriage to a respectable hotel near the river. "Wait here," he told Noelle as the carriage stopped. "I'll make arrangements." She watched through the window as he spoke with the hotel manager. After a few minutes, he returned. "There's a small problem," he said. "I've taken a suite for myself, but they have concerns about your accommodations." Noelle's heart sank. Of course, even as a free woman, she wouldn't be welcome in a white establishment. "However," Bra M continued, "there's a boarding house 2 streets over run by a Mrs. Wilson, a free woman of color. She has a room available. I've sent Henry to inquire." "You've thought of everything," Noelle said, impressed despite herself. "I try to," Bram replied, "though I'm learning as we go. This situation is unusual for me as well." Henry returned shortly with good news. Mrs. Wilson had a room and would be happy to accommodate Noelle. "I'll escort you there," Bram said, helping her from the carriage. "We'll meet for breakfast tomorrow, if that suits you. There's a cafe near the river that serves excellent food and doesn't mind mixed company." "Yes, that would be fine," Noelle agreed, still overwhelmed by how quickly her life was changing. Mrs. Wilson's boarding house was modest but clean, with simple furnishings and whitewashed walls. Mrs. Wilson herself was a stout, dignified woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Welcome, child," she said, showing Noelle to a small but comfortable room. "Mr. Whitmore has paid for a week's lodging. Breakfast is at 7 and there's a washroom at the end of the hall." After Mrs. Wilson left, Noelle sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. For the first time since morning, she was alone with her thoughts. She unfolded her freedom papers and read them slowly, each word a miracle. Noelle, aged 24 years, formally. The property of Edward Cheswick is hereby declared free. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks. Free. She was free. But what did freedom really mean when the world still saw her as less than equal? And what of Bram Whitmore? Could she truly trust him and his seemingly noble intentions? As she lay down to sleep in a bed that was for the first time truly hers, Noelle knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, she would face it on her own terms, no longer property, but a woman with choices of her own. The next morning, Noelle woke early. Mrs. Wilson had provided a simple dress that fit her better than her old one, and Noelle took extra care with her appearance. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, eyes brighter, posture straighter. At the agreed time, she made her way to the Riverside Cafe. Bram was already there, waiting at a table on the patio. He stood when he saw her approaching. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Noelle admitted, taking the seat he offered. The waiter approached, hesitating slightly at the sight of Noelle, but Bram's firm gaze convinced him to proceed normally. They ordered coffee and breakfast, and for the first time in her life, Noelle experienced the simple pleasure of being served rather than serving. "I have some business at the docks this morning," Bram said as they ate. "Would you like to come along? I could show you the Northern Star." "I'd like that," Noelle said, surprising herself with how easily she was adjusting to this new dynamic between them. After breakfast, they walked to the harbor. Noelle was conscious of the stares they received, a well-dressed white man walking beside a black woman, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Some looks were merely curious, others openly hostile. "Ignore them," Bram said quietly, noticing her discomfort. "Their opinions matter not at all." The docks were bustling with activity, sailors loading and unloading cargo, merchants haggling over prices, ships of all sizes moored along the waterfront. Bram led her to a magnificent vessel with 3 tall masts and sleek lines. "The Northern Star," he announced proudly. "Fastest ship in my fleet." Noelle gazed up at it in wonder. "She's beautiful. Would you like to come aboard?" Before she could answer, a voice called out, "Whitmore, is that you?" They turned to see a portly man in expensive clothes hurrying toward them, followed by 2 younger men. "Gordon," Bram greeted him with a polite nod. "I didn't expect to see you in Savannah." "Business, my dear fellow, business." Gordon clapped him on the shoulder, then noticed Noelle. His smile faltered. "And who might this be?" "This is Miss Noelle," Bram said simply. "Noelle, this is Mr. Gordon, a business associate from Charleston." Gordon's eyebrows rose at the formal introduction. He looked at Noel with obvious confusion, then back to Bram. "I see," he said, though clearly he didn't. "Well, Whitmore, we must catch up. I'm staying at the Pulaski Hotel. Dinner tonight?" "Unfortunately, I have prior commitments," Bram declined smoothly. "Perhaps another time." Gordon's gaze shifted between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Ah, yes. Another time, then." He tipped his hat and walked away, already whispering to his companions. "That will be all over Savannah by nightfall," Bram said with a sigh. "I'm causing problems for you," Noel realized. "Perhaps I should stay at the boarding house while you conduct your business." "Absolutely not," Bram said firmly. "Let them talk. Now, would you like to see the ship or not?" As they embed the gangplank onto the Northern Star, Noel couldn't help but wonder what she had gotten herself into. This man beside her was risking his reputation, his business relationships, perhaps even more, all for her. All for... why? What did he truly want from her? And more importantly, what did she want from him? The questions swirled in her mind as Bram proudly showed her around his beautiful ship, the vessel that would soon carry them both to a new world, and hate ever awaited them there. The week in Savannah passed more quickly than Noel could have imagined. Each day brought new experiences. Her first restaurant meal, her first visit to a bookshop where Bram insisted on buying her 3 volumes of her choosing, her first time seeing a theatrical performance. Throughout it all, Bram remained a perfect gentleman. He escorted her during the day, but always returned her to Mrs. Wilson's boarding house by nightfall. He never touched her beyond offering his arm when they walked, and he treated her with a respect she had never known from any man, let alone a white one. But Noel wasn't naive. She noticed the whispers that followed them, the shocked looks, the open disapproval. More than once, she suggested that she should stay behind while he attended to business. "Nonsense," Bram would say firmly. "Let them stare, we're doing nothing wrong." On their final evening, in Savannah, Bram invited her to dine with him at his hotel. A private dining room had been arranged to avoid the discomfort of the main restaurant. "We sail with the morning tide," he told her as they ate. "Are you nervous about the journey?" "A little," Noel admitted. "I've never been on a ship before." "The crossing can be rough at times," Bram warned, "but Captain Reynolds is the finest sailor I know. He'll see us safely to New York." Noel nodded, poking at the food on her plate. Something had been weighing on her mind, and she finally found the courage to ask, "What will people in New York think about you bringing me there?" Bram set down his fork. "Some will talk just as they do here, but New York society, while not without its prejudices, is somewhat more so flexible than Southern society." "Because I'll be your housekeeper," Noel said, watching his reaction carefully. "Yes," Bram agreed, meeting her gaze steadily. "Though I hope, in time, we might be friends as well." "Just friends?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. A complex emotion crossed Bram's face. "Noel, I won't pretend I don't feel drawn to you. But your situation is precarious. You're newly free, dependent on me for your livelihood and home. It would be wrong of me to take advantage of that imbalance." "And if the imbalance were less," she pressed, "then perhaps we could see where this connection between us might lead," he said softly, "but only when you are truly independent and free to choose for yourself." His answer surprised her. Most men she'd known would have seized any advantage, any power they held over a woman. That Bram recognized the problem and refused to exploit it only increased her respect for him. "Thank you for your honesty," she said finally. "Always," he promised. "Now let's discuss more practical matters. Have you everything you need for the journey?" The Northern Star set sail at dawn the next day. Noel stood at the rail, watching as Savannah's waterfront receded into the distance. Beside her, Bram pointed out features of the ship, naming sails and lines with obvious pride. "She was my first major purchase after establishing my shipping business," he explained. "I sailed with her myself for the first 2 years." "You were a sailor, Noel?" he asked, surprised. Bram laughed. "A very poor one, but yes, I wanted to understand every aspect of the business." The first day at sea was magical. The weather was perfect, with clear skies and a steady breeze that carried them swiftly northward. Captain Reynolds, a gruff man with a weather-beaten face, treated Noel with the same respectful courtesy he showed Bram, which she found both refreshing and disorienting. Bram had secured 2 of the ship's best cabins for their journey. Noel's was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed bolted to the floor, a tiny desk and a porthole that looked out over the endless blue of the Atlantic. That night, as the ship rocked gently beneath her, Noel lay awake thinking about the extraordinary turn her life had taken. Just 2 weeks ago she had been a slave, her entire existence controlled by others. Now she was a free woman sailing toward a new life in a new Sitwai, and Bram Whitmore. She wasn't sure what to make of him. His kindness seemed genuine, his respect unwavering. But could she truly trust him? Could she trust herself and these new feelings stirring within her? On the second day, the weather changed. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the sea grew rough. By afternoon, rain lashed the decks, and the ship pitched and rolled in the growing swells. Noel, who had never experienced anything like it, found herself miserably seasick. She huddled in her cabin, certain that death would be preferable to the continued suffering. A soft knock at her door roused her from her misery. "Noel, it's Bram. May I come in?" "Yes," she managed weakly. He entered, carrying a steaming mug. Despite the violent motion of the ship, he moved with the easy balance of someone accustomed to life at sea. "Ginger tea," he said, offering her the mug. "It helps with the sickness." Noel took it gratefully, sipping the hot, spicy liquid. "Does the storm worry you?" she asked, noticing the concern in his eyes. "Captain Reynolds says it's nothing serious," Bram assured her. "Just uncomfortable for a day or so." He sat on the small chair beside her bed. "When I first went to sea, I was sick for 3 days straight. The sailors took great delight in mocking the Greenlandsman." The image of a younger Bram, seasick and miserable, made Noel smile despite her discomfort. "I can't imagine you being mocked by anyone." "Oh, I've had my share of hard lessons," he said with a rueful smile. "My father was a dock worker who died when I was 12. I started working on the docks myself the next day to support my mother and sisters." This was new information. Noel had assumed he came from wealth. "How did you come to own ships instead of loading them?" "Stubbornness, mostly," Bram chuckled. "And luck. I saved every penny, learned to read and cipher in the evenings, and eventually worked my way up to clerk for a shipping agent. When he retired, he sold me his business on credit. I paid him back within 2 years." "And your family? Your mother and sisters?" A shadow crossed his face. "My mother passed 5 years ago. My sisters are both married with families of their own in Boston. We write often." "I'm sorry about your mother," Noel said softly. "Thank you." He stood, steadying himself against the wall as the ship lurched. "Try to rest. I'll check on you later." After he left, Noel pondered this new information. Bram wasn't born to privilege as she had assumed. He had worked for everything he had, just as she would need to work for her new life. Somehow this made him seem more human, more approachable. The storm continued through the night, but the ginger tea did help, and Noel managed to sell Eep despite the rocking of the ship. By the 3rd day, the weather had cleared, and Noel felt well enough to venture back on deck. She found Bram in conversation with Captain Reynolds, the 2 men poring over a chart spread on a small table. "Ah, there you are," Bram said warmly when he saw her. "Feeling better?" "Much, thank you," she replied. The fresh air and sunshine were already working wonders on her spirits. "We've made good time despite the storm," Captain Reynolds informed them. "We should reach New York in 4 more days if the winds hold." 4 more days. Noel felt both excitement and apprehension at the thought. What would await her in New York? Would she find her place in this new world? Would Bram's household accept her presence? As if reading her thoughts, Bram said, "I've sent a telegram from Savannah to Mrs. Collins, my housekeeper. She'll have everything ready for your arrival." "What did you tell her about me?" Noel asked. "The truth," Bram said simply. "That you're a free woman from Georgia who will be joining the household staff. Mrs. Collins doesn't need to know more than that for now." Noel nodded, relieved. She wasn't ready to face questions about her past or the unusual circumstances of her journey north. The remaining days at sea settled into a pleasant routine. Mornings found Noel and Bram walking the deck together, discussing books or sharing stories from their vastly different lives. In the afternoons, Bram attended to business correspondence, while Noel read the books he had bought her in Savannah. Evenings were spent dining with Captain Reynolds and the ship's first officer, Mr. Daniels. To Noel's surprise, neither man seemed troubled by her presence at the captain's table. When she mentioned this to Bram, he explained, "Sailors are a more worldly breed than most. They've seen ports across the globe, encountered people of every color and creed. They judge a person by their character, not their appearance." "Is that how you learned to do the same?" she asked. Bram considered this. "Perhaps, though I'd like to think I would have come to that understanding regardless. The idea that a person's worth is determined by the color of their skin has always seemed absurd to me." "Yet you were in Georgia looking to do business with men who believe exactly that," Noel pointed out. "Business is business," Bram said with a slight frown. "I don't have to agree with a man's views to trade with him." "But doesn't doing business with men like Mr. Cheswick support the very system you claim to find absurd?" The question seemed to trouble him. "I've never thought of it quite that way," he admitted. "You make a fair point. Perhaps I've been too willing to separate my personal beliefs from my business practices." Noel hadn't expected him to acknowledge her criticism so readily. Most men in her experience became defensive when challenged, especially by a woman. Bram's willingness to consider her perspective only deepened her growing admiration for him. On the 7th day of their voyage, the lookout's cry rang out, "Land ho! New York Harbor ahead!" Noel rushed to the rail, straining to see the approaching shoreline. Gradually, the distant T-smudge on the horizon resolved into the unmistakable shape of land. As they drew closer, the magnificent skyline of New York City came into view. A forest of buildings, church spires, and ship masts, unlike anything she had ever seen. "It's breathtaking," she whispered. "Welcome to New York," Bram said, coming to stand beside her. "Your new home." The ship navigated the busy harbor, passing other vessels of all shapes and sizes. Noel watched in awe as immigrants crowded the decks of a large steamer, their faces reflecting the same mix of hope and anxiety she felt. When they finally docked, Bram escorted her down the gangplank to where a handsome carriage waited. The driver, an older white man with bushy sideburns, tipped his hat. "Welcome back, Mr. Whitmore," he said. "Mrs. Collins has everything prepared as you requested." "Thank you, Jenkins," Bram replied. "This is Miss Noel. She'll be joining our household." If Jenkins was surprised, he showed no sign of it. "Welcome, Miss Noel," he said with the same respectful tone he had used for Bram. As the carriage wound through the bustling streets of New York, Noel tried to absorb everything at once. The towering buildings, the crowds of people, the sheer noise and energy of the city. It was overwhelming after the quiet routine of the Cheswick estate. "It's very different from Georgia," she said, feelies. Nung slightly dazed. "You'll adjust," Bram assured her, "though it may take time." They turned onto a wide avenue lined with elegant townhouses, each more impressive than the last. Finally, the carriage stopped before a 4-story brownstone with gleaming windows and a polished brass door knocker. "Here we are," Bram said. "Whitmore House." The front door opened as they approached, revealing a tall, thin woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and dear, kind face. "Welcome home, Mr. Whitmore," she said warmly. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. This is Miss Noel, whom I wrote to you about." Mrs. Collins smiled at Noel. "Welcome to Whitmore House, Miss Noel. Your room is ready and I've taken the liberty of having some suitable clothing made up for you." "Thank you," Noel managed, still overwhelmed by it all. "Mrs. Collins runs this house with remarkable efficiency," Bram told Noel. "You'll be in good hands with her." Mrs. Collins showed Noel to her room on the 3rd floor. It was larger than any space she had ever had to herself, with a comfortable bed, a wardrobe, a small writing desk, and a window overlooking a garden at the back of the house. "The washroom is at the end of the hall," Mrs. Collins explained. "You'll share it with Betsy, our cook, and Lucy, the housemaid. Breakfast is at 7, but Mr. Whitmore usually takes his in the study at AGHT. He asked that you join him there tomorrow morning to discuss your duties." After Mrs. Collins left, Noel sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. She was in New York City, in a beautiful house, with a room of her own. She was free, with the promise of paid employment and education. It seemed too good to be true. Part of her kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for Bram to reveal his true intentions, but another part, growing stronger each day, believed in his sincerity. That night, Noel met the other staff. Betsy, a cheerful Irish woman in her 40s who ran the kitchen, Lucy, a young English girl who handled the cleaning and laundry, and Jenkins, who served as both coachman and butler. All treated her with courtesy, though she sensed their curiosity about her sudden appearance in their midst. "Mrs. Collins says you're from Georgia," Betsy said, as they shared an evening cup of tea in the kitchen. "How do you find New York so far?" "It's overwhelming," Noel admitted. "Everything is so big, so busy." "You'll get used to it," Betsy assured her. "I felt the same when I first arrived from Dublin. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else." "What's Mr. Whitmore like as an employer?" Noel asked cautiously. "The best I've ever had," Betsy said without hesitation. "Fair with his wages, respectful in his manner, never raises his voice even when things go wrong. Keeps to himself mostly, especially since his wife passed." "His wife?" Noel tried to sound merely curious rather than intensely interested. "Miss Caroline," Lucy chimed in. "I never met her. She died before I came. But Mrs. Collins says she was a real lady. Consumption took her, poor thing. Mr. Whitmore was heartbroken." "He never speaks of her," Betsy added, "but he keeps her portrait in his study. 3 years gone now, and he still wears his wedding band." This information gave Noel much to think about as she prepared for bed. Bram had mentioned losing his wife but hadn't elaborated. Knowing he had loved her deeply enough to still mourn her years later revealed another layer to the complex man who had so suddenly changed her life. The next morning, Noel dressed in one of the new outfits Mrs. Collins had provided, a simple but well-made blue dress with a white collar. It was the finest clothing she had ever worn, and she couldn't help admiring her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser. At precisely 8 o'clock, she knocked on the study door. "Come in," Bram called. The study was a handsome room, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk near the window. Bram stood when she entered, gesturing for her to take a seat in one of the leather armchairs. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Very well, thank you," Noel replied. "Everyone has been more." "Sound kind. I'm glad to hear it." Bram sat across from her. "Now, as to your position here, while I suggested you might serve as housekeeper, I realize Mrs. Collins already fills that role admirably. So instead, I thought perhaps you might prefer to serve as my personal assistant." "Assistant?" Noel repeated, confused. "What would that entail?" "Managing my correspondence, organizing my appointments, perhaps eventually helping with some business matters. But most importantly, it would give you time to further your education." He gestured to a stack of books on his desk. "I've taken the liberty of acquiring some texts I thought might interest you. History, literature, mathematics." Noel was speechless. This was far more than she had expected. "I don't know what to say. I'm not sure I'm qualified." "You can read and write, which is the essential starting point. The rest you can learn." Bram leaned forward. "Noel, I meant what I said about nurturing your mind. This position would allow you to do so while also earning your keep." "People will talk," she said softly. "A black woman working so closely with you." "Let them talk," Bram said dismissively. "This is my home and I'll run it as I see fit." His confidence was reassuring, but Noel still had concerns. "And when you marry again, what then?" A flicker of something, pain, regret, crossed Bram's face. "I have no immediate plans in that direction, but should that day come, we would address the situation then." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. "I understand your caution, Noel. Your life has taught you to expect the worst from people, but I ask that you give this arrangement a chance. If at any point you find it unsatisfactory, we can discuss alternatives." Noel considered his offer. It was more generous than anything she could have imagined. Not just employment, but education and respect. The position would place her in close proximity to Bram daily, which both thrilled and frightened her. "I accept," she said finally, "and I thank you for this opportunity." Bram smiled, and the warmth of it reached his eyes. "Excellent." Shall we begin today? I have correspondence that needs sorting, and then perhaps we could review the basics of mathematics to see where you're educated. On should start. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to Noel's life. Mornings were spent in the study with Bram, learning to organize his business affairs and studying from the books he provided. Afternoons often found her practicing her writing or reading in the garden when weather permitted. Evenings were her own, though she occasionally joined Bram for dinner when he dined at home. To her surprise, the household staff accepted her unusual position without complaint. Mrs. Collins, in particular, seemed to take Noel under her wing, offering guidance on everything from proper table settings to the intricacies of New York society. "Mr. Whitmore sees something special in you," Mrs. Collins told her one afternoon as they folded linens together. "I haven't seen him take such an interest in anyone since Miss Caroline." Noel felt her cheeks warm. "We're just employer and employee." Mrs. Collins gave her a knowing look, but didn't press the issue. As comfortable as her new life was becoming, Noel remained acutely aware of the wider world outside Whitmore House. On her rare ventures into the city, always accompanied by Jenkins or Mrs. Collins, she encountered the complex realities of being a free black woman in America. Some shopkeepers were polite, others coldly civil, and a few openly hostile. Even in New York, a city with a significant free black population, prejudice was a daily reality. One afternoon, returning from a bookshop with Mrs. Collins, Noel noticed a group of well-dressed white women whispering and staring as they passed. Their looks weren't merely curious but judgmental, even contemptuous. "Don't mind them," Mrs. Collins said quietly. "Small minds will always find something to disapprove of." "They think I don't belong here," Noel said, keeping her voice steady, despite the H-ert. "Then it's their loss," Mrs. Collins replied firmly. "Now, let's hurry home. There's a chill in the air today." Back at Whitmore House, Noel found Bram in the study reviewing business ledgers. He looked up with a smile when she entered. "How was your outing?" he asked. "Educational," she replied carefully. Something in her tone made him set down his pen. "Was there trouble?" "No trouble," Noel assured him. "Just reality." Bram's expression candid. "Someone was unkind to you?" "Not directly, but there were looks, whispers." She shrugged, trying to appear less affected than she felt. "I'm learning that freedom doesn't mean acceptance." "I'm sorry," Bram said softly. "I wish I could change people's minds as easily as I changed your circumstances." "You've done more than enough," Noel said quickly. "I don't expect you to fix the entire world." Bram rose and came around the desk to stand before her. "Perhaps not the entire world, but I can at least ensure that my own home is a place where you are respected and valued." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. Before she could respond, however, Jenkins appeared at the door. "Excuse me, sir. Mr. Harrington is here to see you." Bram frowned slightly. "I wasn't expecting him. Show him to the parlor, please. I'll be there shortly." He turned back to Noel. "We'll continue this conversation later." She nodded and slipped out through the side door as Bram prepared to meet his visitor. As the weeks turned into months, Noel's confidence grew along with her skills. Her handwriting, already neat, became elegant. Her knowledge of mathematics and literature expanded rapidly. She proved to have a natural talent for organization that made her increasingly valuable to Bram's business affairs. By December, 4 months after her arrival in New York, she was managing most of his correspondence and maintaining his appointment calendar with efficient precision. Bram, true to his word, paid her a fair wage, which she carefully saved. Winter transformed the city, covering it with a blanket of snow that made everything seem cleaner, brighter. Noel, who had never experienced a northern winter, delighted in the novelty of snowflakes and frozen ponds. "You look like a child at Christmas," Bram laughed one morning as she stood at the study window watching the snow fall. "It's magical," she admitted. "In Georgia, we might get a dusting of snow once every few years, nothing like this." "Wait until February, when we're all sick of slush and ice," he warned good-naturedly. "You won't find it quite so charming then." Their relationship had evolved into a comfortable friendship, underscored by a mutual respect that deepened with each passing day. Bram Neve R. overstepped the boundaries of propriety, but Noel couldn't help noticing the way his gaze sometimes lingered on her face, or how his hand occasionally brushed hers when they reviewed documents together. For her part, Noel found herself thinking of him at odd moments, wondering if he would like a particular passage in a book she was reading, or looking forward to sharing some small triumph in her studies. These growing feelings both excited and troubled her. Was she mistaking gratitude for something more? And even if her feelings were genuine, could anything ever come of them? The world would never accept a relationship between a white man of Bram's standing and a woman like her. Such thoughts occupied her mind one evening as she helped Mrs. Collins prepare the house for a small dinner party Bram was hosting for business associates. "Will you be serving tonight?" Mrs. Collins asked as they arranged FLOs in the dining room. "Mr. Whitmore hasn't mentioned it," Noel replied. "Usually she remained upstairs during his social engagements." Mrs. Collins adjusted a lily. "Well, best have a suitable dress ready just in case. The dark blue one would be appropriate." An hour before the guests were due to arrive, Bram knocked on Noel's door. When she opened it, she found him looking uncharacteristically nervous. "May I speak with you a moment?" he asked Ed. "Of course." She stepped aside to let him enter, leaving the door ajar for propriety's sake. Bram cleared his throat. "I have a somewhat unusual request. I'd like you to join us for dinner tonight. Not as staff, but as a guest." Noel stared at him in surprise. "Join your dinner party? But why?" "Because Mr. Harrington, whom you've met, is bringing his wife and daughter. Miss Harrington has recently returned from Boston Ladies' Seminary and is apparently quite the blue stocking. I thought you might enjoy some female companionship closer to your own age." Noel hesitated. "Your other guests, they might not be comfortable with my presence." "The only other guests are the Abbotts, and they're Quakers with strong abolitionist leanings," Bram assured her. "They won't be troubled by your presence, quite the contrary." Still, Noel wavered. "I don't know if I'm ready for such a gathering. My manners are impeccable," Bram interrupted. "Noel, you don't have to accept if it makes you uncomfortable, but I think you would enjoy the evening and—" He paused. "I would be honored by your company at my table." The sincerity in his voice decided her. "Then I accept. Thank you for the invitation." Bram smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Wonderful. Dinner is at 7. After he left, Noel hurried to prepare herself, her mind racing. This wasn't just any dinner. It was her first formal social engagement as a free woman, an equal at the table rather than a servant behind it. The dark blue dress Mrs. Collins had suggested was indeed perfect. Simple enough not to appear ostentatious, but elegant enough for the occasion. Noel arranged her hair carefully and added the small pearl earrings Bram had given her as a Christmas gift just the week before. At precisely 7 o'clock, she descended the stairs to the parlor where Bram waited with his guests. Conversation paused as she entered, and all eyes turned to her. Bram immediately came forward, a warm smile on his face. "Ah, here she is. Allow me to present Miss Noel, my ward and assistant." Ward. The word surprised Noel, but she understood its utility. It provided a socially acceptable explanation for her presence in his household without raising uncomfortable questions. "Miss Noel, may I introduce M.R. and Mrs. Abbott, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, and their daughter, Miss Catherine Harrington." Noel curtsied gracefully. "I'm pleased to meet you all." Mrs. Abbott, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, stepped forward immediately. "My dear, what a pleasure. Mr. Whitmore has mentioned you in passing, but he didn't tell us how charming you are." Mr. Abbott, tall and serious with a bristling white beard, nodded approval. "Indeed. I understand you came to New York from Georgia. A difficult journey, I imagine." "Yes, sir," Noel replied carefully, "but well worth it for the opportunities New York offers." Catherine Harrington, a pretty young woman about Noel's age with intelligent eyes, regarded her with open curiosity. "Mr. Whitmore says you have quite a talent for mathematics. I found it my most challenging subject at seminary." The Harringtons themselves were more reserved but polite enough. As Jenkins announced dinner, Bram offered Noel his arm to escort her to the dining room, a gesture that drew a raised eyebrow from Mr. Harrington, but no comment. The dinner itself passed more pleasantly than Noel had dared hope. The conversation ranged from business matters to literature to the latest political news from Washington. To her surprise, her opinions were sought and respectfully received, particularly by the Abbotts and Catherine. "Miss Noel, what do you make of Mrs. Stowe's novel?" Mrs. Abbott asked at one point, referring to Uncle Tom's Cabin, which had caused such a sensation a few years earlier. Noel chose her words carefully. "I think Mrs. Stowe had good intentions in bringing the horrors of slavery to light, but her portrayal sometimes lacks the full humanity of those she seeks to defend." Mrs. Abbott nodded thoughtfully. "An insightful observation. Have you read Frederick Douglass's narrative?" "Not yet, though it's on my list," Noel replied. "I shall send you my copy tomorrow," Mrs. Abbott promised. "I think you'll find his first-hand account more resonant." As the evening progressed, Noel gradually relaxed, even enjoying herself. Catherine proved to be well-read and eager to discuss everything from poetry to women's rights. The two young women found themselves deep in conversation, while the older guests discussed business over Brand Y. "You must call on me sometime," Catherine said warmly as the evening drew to a close. "Father has an extensive library, and I would welcome the company of another young woman who values ideas over gossip." "I would like that," Noel replied, genuinely pleased at the prospect of friendship. After the guests departed, Noel helped Mrs. Collins clear the last of the dishes, despite the housekeeper's protests that it wasn't necessary. "Old habits," Noel explained with a smile. "Besides, I'm too full of thoughts to sleep just yet." Mrs. Collins patted her hand. "You did very well tonight. I was watching from the serving door. You carried yourself like a true lady." "Thank you," Noel said, touched by the older woman's approval. She found Bram in the study, enjoying a final glass of brandy by the fire. He stood when she entered. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for including me tonight. It was a remarkable experience." "You were remarkable," Bram replied. "You charmed everyone at the table." "Not everyone," Noel corrected gently. "Mr. Harrington seemed rather cool." Bram waved this aside. "Harrington is cool to everyone, but his wife invited you to tea next week, and Catherine clearly adores you already. I'd call that a triumph." Noel smiled, warmed by his praise. "Your ward?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Bram had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "It seemed the simplest explanation. I hope you don't mind." "No," she admitted. "It was clever, actually, and much easier than explaining the truth." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the fire crackling softly in the grate. Something had shifted between them tonight, Noel realized. By presenting her as his ward, a member of his household rather than merely an employee, Bram had elevated her status in the eyes of his social circle. It was a public acknowledgement of her importance to him. "Well, I should retire," she said finally. "Good night, Bram." It was the first time she had addressed him by his first name alone, without the formal Mr. Whitmore. The intimacy of it hung in the air between them. "Good night, Noel," he replied softly. "Sweet dreams." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Noel knew that her dreams that night would indeed be sweet, and would feature the kind, complex man who had forever changed her life. Spring came to New York, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility. The gardens behind Whitmore House bloomed with tulips and daffodils, and the trees along Fifth Avenue dressed themselves in delicate green leaves. For Noel, the changing season marked 8 months since her arrival in the city. 8 months of freedom, education, and growing confidence. Her friendship with Catherine Harrington had blossomed, providing her with both companionship and a window into New York society. The two young women met regularly for tea or walks in the park, discussing books and sharing confidences. "Father says Mr. Whitmore is considering a significant expansion of his shipping business," Catherine mentioned one afternoon as they strolled through Central Park. "Yes, he's been working late every night this week," Noel confirmed. "The new route to California could double his profits." Catherine gave her a sidelong glance. "You two have grown quite close, haven't you?" Noel felt her cheeks warm. "He's been very kind to me." "Kind?" Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Noel, the way he looks at you is not merely kindness. And if I'm not mistaken, you feel something for him as well. It's complicated, Noelle sighed. Even if we did have feelings for each other, the world would never accept us. Some parts of the world might surprise you, Catherine said gently. The Abbotts, for instance, would be delighted. And my parents have come to think highly of you, despite Father's initial reservations. But others would be scandalized. It could ruin his business, his reputation. Catherine squeezed her arm sympathetically. Love often requires courage, my friend. Love. Was that what she felt for Bram? The word both thrilled and frightened her. In her old life, love had been a luxury she couldn't afford to contemplate. Now, as a free woman, she allowed herself to examine her feelings more honestly. Yes, she cared deeply for Bram. She admired his integrity, his intelligence, his quiet strength. She looked forward to their mornings together in the study, their conversations over dinner, even their occasional disagreements about politics or literature. His rare smile directed at her could brighten her entire day. But did she love him? And more importantly, did he love her? That evening, Noelle found Bram in the library poring over shipping manifests and ledgers. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. You should rest, she said, setting down the tea tray she had brought. You've been working for hours. Bram looked up with a weary smile. Just a few more calculations. This California venture is either going to make my fortune or break me. It won't break you, Noelle said confidently, pouring him a cup of tea. You're too clever for that. He accepted the tea gratefully. Your faith in me is heartening, if perhaps misplaced. Nonsense. Noelle sat across from him. I've watched you work for months now. You don't take foolish risks. Bram sipped his tea, studying her over the rim of the cup. How was your walk with Catherine today? Pleasant. The park is beautiful in spring. And what did you discuss, if I may ask? Business expansions, perhaps? His tone was light, but his eyes were watchful. Noelle felt her cheeks warm again. Among other things, Catherine is observant. Is she? Bram set down his cup. And what has she observed? The tension in the room shifted, becoming something else entirely. Noelle's heart began to race. She thinks... Noelle hesitated, then gathered her courage. She thinks you have feelings for me, beyond those of a guardian or employer. Bram was very still. And what did you tell her? That it's complicated. Noelle met his gaze steadily. That the world would not approve. I see. Bram stood and walked to the window, his back to her. And did you also tell her how you feel? Noelle's breath caught. This was the moment, she realized. The moment to be honest, or to retreat to safer ground. No, she said softly. I didn't tell her that I think about you constantly, that your kindness and respect have shown me what a man should be, that I... She faltered, then pushed on. That I care for you more deeply than I ever thought possible. Bram turned slowly to face Hiar, his expression unreadable. Noelle, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You must know that I have fought my feelings for you since the day you walked into that parlor in Georgia. I told myself it was wrong, that you were vulnerable, dependent on me, that you needed time to discover who you are as a free woman before I burdened you with my affections. And now, Noelle whispered, now I see a woman who knows her own mind, who has blossomed into the person she was always meant to be. He took a step toward her. A woman I have come to love against all reason or propriety. Love. The word hung in the air between them, powerful and transformative. The world will not make it easy for us, Noelle warned, even as hope bloomed within her. The world rarely makes anything worthwhile easy, Bram replied. But if you're willing to face the challenges with me, I believe we can build a life together. He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. Noelle, I'm not asking for an answer tonight. This is too important for hasty decisions. I want you to be certain, to consider all that a life with me would mean, both the joys and the difficulties. She looked up at him, this man who had changed her world, who had seen her worth when no one else did. I will think on it, she promised. But Bram, you should know that my heart already knows its answer. For even if my mind needs time to accept it, He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Then I shall wait, with hope. The following weeks were a sweet torment for Noelle. Now that their feelings were acknowledged, a new awareness colored every interaction with Bram. Each glance, each casual touch carried deeper meaning, yet they maintained a careful propriety, mindful of the household staff and the need for Noelle to be absolutely certain of her choice. She confided in Catherine, who was delighted by the development. "I knew it," Catherine exclaimed over tea in her father's parlor. "The way he watches you when you're not looking, it's terribly romantic." "It's terribly complicated," Noelle corrected her. "If we were to formalize our relationship, there would be consequences. Social ostracism, business difficulties." "For a time, perhaps," Catherine acknowledged. "But society has a short memory when it comes to the wealthy. And there are circles in New York where you would be welcomed. The abolitionists, the reformers, the artistic set." "And what of children?" Noelle asked quietly. "Would they be welcomed too?" Catherine's expression softened. "That would be harder, but not impossible. The abbot's son married a Creole woman from New Orleans. Their children attend the Friends School without issue." Noelle nodded thoughtfully. She had been considering all aspects of a potential future with Bram, including the most difficult ones. Children of mixed race faced particular challenges, straddling two worlds and often accepted by neither. Yet the more she contemplated a life with Bram, the more certain she became that it was what she wanted, despite the obstacles they would face. One evening in late April, Bram invited Noelle to join him for a carriage ride. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said mysteriously. Jenkins drove them through the city, eventually stopping before a handsome brick house on a quiet street in Greenwich Village. "What is this place?" Noelle asked as Bram helped her from the carriage. "A possibility," he replied, producing a key from his pocket. "Come and see." The house was smaller than Whitmore House, but beautiful, with high ceilings, large windows, and elegant but simpler furnishings. "It was built last year," Bram explained as he showed her through the rooms. 3 bedrooms, a study, a small garden in back. The neighborhood is known for its artists, writers, and unconventional thinkers. Noelle understood immediately. "A place where we might be more accepted." "Yes," Bram confirmed. "My current home has served me well, but it carries memories of my past. This could be a fresh start. Our home, not just mine." He watched her carefully. "If tea hat's what you want." Noelle walked to the window, looking out at the tree-lined street. "You would leave Fifth Avenue for this." "I would leave far more than that for you," Bram said simply. The certainty in his voice made her turn back to him. "I've been thinking about your question, about building a life together." "And?" His expression was a mixture of hope and apprehension. "And I believe that love is worth any challenge we might face." She moved closer to him. "I love you, Bram Whitmore. I want to build that life with you, whatever may come." The joy that transformed his face was answer enough, but he put it into words anyway. "And I love you, Noelle, more than I can express." Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, almost reverent, a promise rather than a demand. When they parted, Noelle felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, a final acceptance of all that she was and all that she could become with this man beside her. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now we make plans," Bram replied. "Carefully, thoughtfully. I won't rush you into anything, Noelle. We'll take each step together, at a pace that feels right to both of us." The next morning, Bram called the household staff together in the parlor. Noelle stood beside him, nervous but resolute as they faced Mrs. Colin S., Betsy, Lucy, and Jenkins. "I have an announcement to make," Bram began. "As you all know, Miss Noelle has become an important part of this household over the past 8 months. What you may not know is that she has also become an important part of my life. Indeed, the most important part." Mrs. Collins's eyes widened slightly, but she remained composed. The others exchanged glances, clearly unsurprised. "We have decided to build a life together," Bram continued. "I know this may come as a shock to some of you, and I understand if you feel you cannot remain in my employment because of it." To Noelle's surprise, it was Jenkins who spoke first. Begging your pardon, sir, but it's no shock to anyone with eyes. And speaking for myself, I've served you for 15 years and never found you anything but fair and decent. That's good enough for me." Betsy nodded vigorously. "Same here, sir. Miss Noel's a fine lady, and if she makes you happy, then I'm happy too." Lucy bobbed a quick curtsy. "I don't mind at all, sir, miss." All eyes turned to Mrs. Collins, whose opinion carried the most weight. The housekeeper studied Noel for a long moment, then offered a small smile. "I've watched you both these past months," she said. "I've seen the care and respect between you. It's rare and precious, whatever the world might say." She straightened her shoulders. "You'll face challenges, to be sure, but you'll face them with this household behind you." Noel felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you." "There's more," Bram said, squeezing Noel's hand. "We'll be moving to a new home in Greenwich Village within the next month. You're all welcome to come with us, with increased wages to compensate for any discomfort you might experience due to our situation." The staff exchanged looks again, then one by one nodded their agreement. Even in a city as diverse as New York, working for an interracial couple would raise eyebrows. That they were willing to do so touched Noel deeply. "Now," Bram concluded, "we would appreciate your discretion until arrangements are finalized. Thank you for your loyalty and understanding." As the staff dispersed, Mrs. Collins lingered. "Miss Caroline would have approved," she said quietly to Bram. "She always said, you deserve to find love again." Bram's expression softened at the mention of his late wife. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. That means a great deal." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Bram purchased the Greenwich Village house and began making preparations for their move. Noel, with Catherine's enthusiastic assistance, selected furnishings and decorations for their new home. They decided to be forthright with their closest friends. The Abbotts, as predicted, were delighted by the news. "It's about time," Mrs. Abbott declared, embracing Noel warmly. "I told Harold months ago that you two were perfectly suited." Mr. Abbott shook Bram's hand firmly. "You'll face obstacles, but you have friends who will stand with you. Never forget that." The Harringtons' reaction was more measured. Mr. Harrington expressed concern about the social and business implications, but didn't withdraw his friendship. Mrs. Harrington was politely supportive, if somewhat reserved. Catherine, of course, was overjoyed. "You must let me help with the wedding," she insisted. "Something small but elegant, perhaps in the Abbott's garden." "Wedding?" Noel repeated, startled. "And we haven't discussed—" "Of course you'll marry," Catherine interrupted. "Perhaps not with all the usual ceremony, but there are ministers who would perform the service. The Reverend Parker at the Abolitionist Church, for instance." Marriage. The possibility hadn't occurred to Noel. Such unions weren't legal in many states, though New York had no specific law against them. Would Bram want that level of commitment, that public declaration? She raised the question that evening as they sat together in the library, reviewing plans for their new home. "Catherine mentioned a wedding today," she said carefully. "Is that something you've considered?" Bram looked up from the floor plans. "I have, actually. I was waiting for the right moment to discuss it." He set the papers aside. "Noel, I want to marry you, legally, properly, but I wasn't sure if you would want that, given the additional complications it might create." "What complications?" "A private arrangement is one thing. A legal marriage is public record. It would make our relationship official in ways that might limit your options in the future." His expression was serious. "If circumstances ever became difficult, or if you ever changed your mind about us, a marriage would be harder to walk away from." Noel understood his concern. He was still trying to protect her freedom, her ability to choose her own path. "I don't plan to change my mind," she said softly, "and I would be honored to be your wife if it's possible." Bram's face lit up with joy. "Then we'll find a way to make it possible." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He opened it to reveal a ring with a single perfect pearl, surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's. I had it resized, hoping you might wear it someday." Noel gasped at its simple beauty. "It's perfect." Bram took her hand, and with a formality that made her smile, knelt before her. "Noelle, from the moment you stepped into that room in Georgia, you changed my life. Your courage, your intelligence, your dignity in the face of injustice, all of it moved me in ways I never expected. I love you with all my heart. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Noelle's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Bram slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and passion and the certainty of a shared future. Their wedding took place on a perfect June day in the Abbott's garden. The guest list was small, just the Abbotts, the Harringtons, Catherine, and the Whitmore house staff. Reverend Parker, a passionate abolitionist with a reputation for progressive views, performed the ceremony. Noelle wore a simple gown of ivory silk that Catherine had helped her select. Her hair was adorned with small white flowers, and she carried a bouquet of roses from the Whitmore garden. Bram, handsome in a new black suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him on Mr. Abbott's arm. The ceremony was brief, but meaningful. When Reverend Parker pronounced them husband and wife, Bram kissed her with such tender joy that Mrs. Abbott dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The small reception afterward was filled with warmth and genuine good wishes. Even Mr. Harrington offered a toast to their happiness. "To Bram and Noelle Whitmore," he said, raising his glass, "and may your courage be rewarded with a lifetime of joy." Later, as twilight settled over the garden, Bram and Noelle took a moment alone together, standing beneath a flowering arbor. "Mrs. Whitmore," Bram said softly, testing the sound of her new name. "How does it feel?" "Like a dream," Noelle admitted, looking down at the gold band now accompanying her pearl engagement ring. "A beautiful dream I never thought I'd have." "It's real," Bram assured her, taking her hands in his. "As real as my love for you." Noelle thought back to that evening at the Chiswick estate, when she had stepped into the parlor and found her life changed forever. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night in Georgia?" Bram smiled. "I said many things, but I think you mean when I told Mr. Chiswick that you weren't lost, that you knew exactly where you were going." "Yes," Noelle nodded. "I didn't then, but I do now." She leaned up to kiss him softly. "I'm going forward with you, wherever our path may lead." Their new life together was not without challenges. There were snubs from former business associates, invitations that stopped coming, whispers that followed them through certain parts of the city. But there were also new friends, new opportunities, and a deep, abiding love that made the difficulties bearable. Their Greenwich Village home became a gathering place for artists, writers, and reformers, people who judged others by their character rather than their color. Bram's business survived the initial shock and eventually thrived again, as his reputation for fair dealing and shrewd investments outweighed the scandal of his marriage. Noelle continued her education, eventually becoming not just Bram's assistant but his full partner in business. Her keen mind and natural talent for organization proved invaluable as they expanded into new ventures. A year after their wedding, they received a letter from Martha, Noelle's friend from the Chiswick estate. The Emancipation Proclamation was still 2 years away, but Martha had managed to buy her freedom through years of saved wages. She asked if there might be work for her in New York. "Invite her immediately," Bram said when Noelle showed him the letter. "We have plenty of room and we can always use another loyal friend in the household." Martha's arrival brought a piece of Noelle's past into her present, but in the best possible way. The two women picked up their friendship as if no time had passed, and Martha quickly became an integral part of the Whitmore household. 5 years after their wedding, Noelle gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Caroline Liberty Whitmore. She had her mother's eyes and her father's smile, and she was adored by everyone in the household. As Bram held his daughter for the first time, his eyes filled with tears of joy and wonder. "She's perfect," he whispered, "just like her mother." Noelle watched them together, her heart overflowing with love. Their daughter would face challenges in a world that often judged people by their appearance rather than their character. But she would face those challenges with parents who loved her fiercely, a home filled with books and ideas, and a circle of friends who saw her for the miracle she was. "Do you ever regret it?" Noelle asked softly as they stood together by the nursery window, watching their daughter sleep. "Everything you gave up for us?" Bram turned to her, his expression serious. "I gave up nothing of value, Noelle. I gained everything that matters." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "The day you stepped into that room in Georgia was the luckiest day of my life." Noelle smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Mine too," she whispered. "Mine too." Outside their window, New York City continued its restless dance of progress and tradition, acceptance and prejudice, past and future. But inside the walls of their home, Bram and Noelle had created something precious and rare, a love strong enough to defy convention, brave enough to face adversity, and deep enough to last a lifetime. It had begun with a single step into a forbidden room. It had grown into a journey neither of them could have imagined, and it would continue day by day, choice by choice, into a future they would build together. The end.